Forbes put out a list of the Democratic candidates that have the most billionaire donors. Now, if you've been paying attention to the race, none of this news should be surprising to you. And keep in mind as well, when you're looking at these candidates that are taking a lot of money from billionaires, ask yourself if they're actually willing to fight for the average person. People don't give large checks and endless money to campaigns if they don't expect to have some kind of influence on that candidate. That should be obvious. So let's take a look at their list. You have Pete Buttigieg at the top with the most billionaire donors at 23, followed by Cory Booker with 18, followed by Kamala Harris with 17, then Michael Bennet, which is kind of surprising to me, at 15, and then Joe Biden there at 13. So 3 of the top 5 candidates in this race right now, at least when we look at polling, Pete Buttigieg, Kamala Harris, Joe Biden, all taking money from billionaires in the double digits. Buttigieg, 23, Kamala Harris, 17, Joe Biden, 13. Now, this is not at all surprising to me. These are candidates that, you know, in many cases, at least in the sense of, or in the case of Buttigieg and Harris, their language attempts to be progressive at times. They, you know, are essentially trying to play both sides, which is what candidates historically, Democratic candidates, have done. They pretend to be for the working class. Then once the general election starts, or once they get into office, everything changes. And all you have to do is look back to who donated to their campaign, and it would have given you at least somewhat of an indication of who this candidate actually was working for the entire time. So it's plainly obvious in the case of Buttigieg, Harris, and Joe Biden here. Before I go on, I just want to... Michael Bennet. I mean, this guy... Michael Bennett's pulling out like 1%, if 1%. And he has 15 billionaire donors. I mean, I feel like that's a video on its own. Just, I want some sort of investigative piece on exactly why Michael Bennet has so many billionaire donors. But for me, it's not that interesting, considering it's Michael Bennet, so I don't really care about the candidate. He's not going to win. It's just weird to see that number. But let's go a little deeper into this list, though, because you have other candidates here that you would expect to not have any billionaire donors, but they do. So Elizabeth Warren and Steve Bullock, who I couldn't care less for, but Elizabeth Warren has 2 billionaire donors. One of them is, let me read this here. The Montana governor and senator from Massachusetts may not have much in common politically, but they both have the same number of billionaire donors. Susan Pritzker, the spouse of Hyatt heir Nicholas Pritzker II, has funded Warren's campaign. Okay, so that's one of Elizabeth Warren's billionaire donors. Go down this list even further. Tulsi Gabbard. Tulsi Gabbard, Andrew Yang, and Marianne Williamson all have 1 billionaire donor each. And in the case of Gabbard and Yang, their billionaire donor is Twitter CEO Jack Dorsey. So this is, I mean, look, I'm completely speculating here, but Tulsi Gabbard and Andrew Yang have both been on Joe Rogan's podcast, as has Jack Dorsey. Maybe that's where he saw them. Maybe that's why he donated. I don't know. But getting down to what really matters here. Which candidates, and especially which top candidates, have no billionaire donors at all? You could probably guess the result here, at least in one case. Bernie Sanders, of course, has no billionaire donors, as well as Julian Castro, Bill de Blasio, and Tim Ryan. Now, in the case of Tim Ryan, he's already out of the race. He has suspended his campaign. So, I mean, he had no chance to begin with. Bill de Blasio, also not surprising, even though, yes, he is, you know, from New York City, the New York City mayor. He was never really a serious candidate. I don't expect him to be in this race that much longer. I don't think he'll be in this race for the next debate. Julian Castro, somebody else who I think is maybe one of the better candidates in terms of the, you know, the candidates that you want to categorize maybe as neoliberals, he is one of the better ones. That said, he also isn't polling very high, so that could be part of the reason why he doesn't have any billionaire support. Bernie Sanders, though, is kind of obvious. I mean, you have a top candidate here. I mean, again, looking at the top candidates, the people polling in the top 5, way above everybody else, Buttigieg, Harris, Biden, Warren, and Sanders. Sanders is the only one not taking any billionaire money at all. And it's because he is an actual threat to the establishment, and they know that. He is a threat to concentrated wealth, a threat to concentrated power. Look, I would argue that in many ways, Elizabeth Warren is as well, but I don't think she really has that the structural analysis and the real desire to take on the powerful the same way that Bernie does. And in addition to that, Bernie is also building a grassroots movement around that. And that is why people actually trust him on his word. He's been saying the same thing for 40 years, and he is building a movement simply for the people. And to make that point, here's this map again that I've shared before in a previous video, but it's worth showing again. These are the candidates with the most individual donors. Bernie Sanders, by far, has the most individual donors, almost doubling that of the second place, which is Elizabeth Warren. And his donors are all across the country, from coast to coast. So we are looking at a candidate here, takes no money from billionaires, is only run on a grassroots movement of individual donors, mostly small individual donors, averaging $18 apiece, a grassroots movement of volunteers, and his support comes from everywhere in America, and they're your average Americans. If you look at the data, they're largely teachers, Amazon workers, Walmart workers, postal workers. These are your average Americans giving to Bernie's campaign because they know they can actually trust him on these issues. So when you take a look at the candidates and wonder who is actually in the position and willing to fight for the average American the most, I think it's clear that person is Bernie Sanders.